Mr. Speaker, I offer the following resolution, waive its reading, and would move the immediate adoption and request the opportunity to briefly explain it.
Proceed, Mr. Tedesco.
Mr. Speaker and my colleagues, to sum up the opposition that we heard early on to voting no on these rules changes on the floor today really are the worst words in the English lexicon. And those words are, but it's always been done that way. So why should we stop now? Well, that really is not an excuse, and it has to stop now. It's ironic that over this weekend, we as a state and a nation moved into daylight savings time. And what we really should be doing as we move into daylight savings time in this state is open up those beautiful red curtains in this chamber and allow the sunlight in, the daylight in, and provide more transparency for the work we do on behalf of the constituents we represent. You may know that famed writer Bob Woodward once said, "The worst thing we have to fear as a nation is secret government. That in darkness, democracy died." Well, I've been here a few years, and I see many of my colleagues across the aisle have also. And I do believe that over the years, in the middle of the night, in many instances, democracy has died a little by a little in many instances. In many instances, most important legislation, and let me give you some, DNA testing for potential criminals, pension reform, teacher evaluations, budgets, the SAFE Act, all those important pieces of legislation had a message of necessity, but were not necessities or emergencies to do in the middle of the night. And yes, you can use the excuse, but it's always been done that way. When we don't want to let the public see what we're doing, we get a message of necessity. It comes in the middle of the night between 12 and 8 a.m., and we get it done while the media is not there and the public's not there to view it. My colleagues, in wartime, sleep deprivation is a tool that armies use to confuse their enemies. Let me tell you something. I'm not your enemy. You're not my enemy. The majority and minority and the governor aren't enemies. And we should not be working in the middle of the night out of the view of our constituents in the media. That's just plain wrong. Legislators shouldn't be pressured to vote on important legislation in a sleep-deprived haze in the middle of the night, no matter how laudable you think the goals are. Otherwise, New Yorkers could be stuck with some very bad consequences. And in the past, they have when that's happened. Now, this is not about working long hours. We over here on our side, and I'm sure you two in the majority, will work as long as it takes to get the job done. But let's do it right. This is about the novel concept of actually enabling people to read legislation before it's voted on. You know, at the federal government, a speaker out there said, well, you got to pass it before you read it. No, our founding fathers didn't say that. They said we had to have the bills on our desk for 3 days, and as representatives, we read legislation. We don't pass it, then try to find out what it means for our constituents. If an agreement made in the dark of night at 3 a.m. in the morning is so good for our state, then it will still be so good for our state when it's debated and voted upon on 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Today, we propose another good government reform designed to make the New York State Assembly more accountable, transparent, and a responsive part of state government. This amendment, Section 2 of Rule 2, would increase the number of members needed to override the rule controlling the hours in session from a simple majority to 2/3 members of the elected assembly. The people's work would be done in the light of day, not in the middle of the night. My colleagues, I think you'll agree, voters and taxpayers should sleep comfortably in the dead of night with sweet dreams, not worry about having nightmares about the actions of their legislature and the governor. Ultimately, if the governor and leaders think that working in darkness is good for New York taxpayers, why don't you and the leaders and the governor have all your press conferences in the middle of the night at 3 a.m.? I don't see any press conferences in the middle of the night. I see them at daylight, where the media is there and the public is there, and I know why. Because clearly they don't They don't do this because they want a full airing of their ideas to the public through the media so they can be seen and heard. But it's not only the good ideas that should be seen and heard, that they're proud of, it's the ones that they necessarily aren't that proud of, which come out in the middle of the night. And that's not acceptable. My colleagues, the Founding Fathers had it right when they developed the three separate branches of government to be a check on each other. If a deal hatched in darkness is right for New York, then it will stand the scrutiny of daylight, and it should always stand that scrutiny. Today, we have a chance to show that this body is serious about reform and transparency. Please join me, Mr. Speaker, and my colleagues in voting for this rules change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move this resolution and this rules change.